Your eyes up in the morning, beneath the stars so bright. Pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. Horses kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. You'll get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight.
Howdy there, I'm Matt McKinley and we're burning daylight.
In the saddle till the job's done right.
Welcome to Burnin' Daylight, the only podcast for the working cowboy. Well, howdy there, daylight burners. Happy Wednesday. Hope the week's treating you all right. We're still busy as hell. I'm sure most of you guys are as well. Oh, fall in the feedlot. It's a fun time. But it's good. Keeps you on your toes. One thing, I guess, unless you live in Hawaii or Arizona, you also have to be a little bit on your toes about, and that is daylight saving time, popularly known as daylight savings time, but officially known as daylight saving time. And it is a point of contention. It's a point of many contentions, and I'm in contention with most of them. Mostly because it doesn't make much sense. I've looked at it, I've talked about it, and probably more than most sane, rational people would care to discuss the idea of saving daylight. Here on the Burnin' Daylight podcast, we don't want to save any of it. Burn it all down. And anyhow, I've briefly looked into it before, and saw some of the debate, the back and forth of why we should have it or we shouldn't have it. But I've not really looked very deep into the origins of daylight saving time. I've kind of did a quick Google search of it before, and it all ended up on Ben Franklin, or the farmers. And while they both get credit for it, neither one of them is true, really. The Ben Franklin situation, much more so than the farmer one. But there's really, there's really no justification for why the farmers are often claimed to be the start of it. But Ben Franklin, there is an actual story there. And I guess if you want to go technically, which it's something I'm want to do, technicalities in play. I guess Ben Franklin maybe actually did come up with the idea of daylight savings time, but it was not quite how people brought it up as, or they give him credit for. So this is from April 26, 1784, and it is a letter to some newspaper in France. He is an ambassador at the time, and basically it was over a subject having to do with taxes, and so there's like a brief little introduction that's not really pertinent. So this is what I send you now is the original piece with some additions and corrections made in it by the author. And as we are frequently disposed in this nation to engage in wars and are sometimes embarrassed in what manner to raise money by taxes, I flatter myself that some ingenious statesman will improve upon the plan suggested in the following paper, and after altering it to the meridian of our island, bring it forwards as a scheme of finance. William the Conqueror is said to have given considerable offense to our ancestors by a law for extinguishing lights and fires after a certain hour in the evening. But as the curfew was established by a foreign prince to enable him to obtain a more complete dominion over this country, and not by our native rulers for the purpose of enabling us to obtain dominion over other countries, difference circumstances that is so essential cannot escape a discerning public. By the help of the savings that must occur from adopting the project in question in its full extent, it is hoped that we shall easily become the terror of nations. In any event, it may allow us to abolish taxes that are a burden upon the public, and above all, on the poor, especially the singular tax imposed in this country upon our use of the light of the sun. So opposite to the project here proposed, the payment of our national debt is another object that may readily be accomplished by it. And the scheme has this further recommendation attending it, that notwithstanding the distress of France in matters of revenue, notwithstanding the late rapid changes of administrators, and no minister in that country, where the hint was originally made public, has appeared willing to adopt it, which promises us exclusive advantages from it in this country, should we prudently adopt it here. And so he leaves a place where you can sign your name. Authors of the journal. Messieurs, you often entertain us with accounts of new discoveries. Permit me to communicate to the public through your paper one that has been made by myself, which I conceive may be of great utility. I was the other evening in the grand company where the new lamp of Messrs. Quinet and Lange was introduced. Blah blah. Much admired for its splendor, but a general inquiry was made whether the oil it consumed was not in proportion to the light it afforded, in which case there would be no saving in the use of it. No one present could satisfy us in this point, and which we all agreed ought to be known, it being a very desirable thing to lessen, if possible, the expense of lighting our apartments when every other article of family expense was so much augmented. I was much pleased to see this general concern for economy, for I love economy exceedingly. I went home and to bed, 3 or 4 hours after midnight, my head full of the subject. Accidental sudden noise waked me about 6 in the morning. I was surprised to find my room filled with light, and I imagined at first that a number of those lamps had been brought into it, but rubbing my eyes, perceived the light came in at the windows. I got up and looked to see what might be the occasion of it, when I saw the sun just rising above the horizon, from whence he poured his rays plentifully into my chambers, my domestic having negligently omitted the preceding night to close the shutters. I looked at my watch, which goes very well, found that it was but 6 o'clock, and still thinking it something extraordinary that the sun should rise so early. I looked into the almanac, where I found it to be the hour given for his rising on that day. I looked forward too, and found that he was to rise still earlier every day towards the end of June, and that at no time in the year he retarded his rising for so long. Oh, damn it, Ben Franklin, you said retarded. You're gonna be canceled now. and that at no time in the year he retarded his rising so long as till 8 o'clock. Your readers, who with me have never seen any signs of sunshine before noon and seldom regard the astronomical part of the almanac, will be as much astonished as I was when they hear of his rising so early. And especially when I assure them that he gives light as soon as he rises. I am convinced of this. I am certain of my fact. One cannot be more certain of any fact. I saw it with my own eyes. And having repeated this observation in the 3 following mornings, I found always precisely the same result. Yet it so happens, when I speak of this discovery to others, I can easily perceive by their countenance, though they forbear expressing it in words, that they do not quite believe me. One, indeed, who is a learned natural philosopher, has assured me that I must certainly be mistaken as to the circumstance of the light coming into my room, for it is well known, as he says, that there could be no light abroad at that hour. It follows that none could enter from without, and that of consequence, my windows being accidentally left open, instead of letting in the light, had only served to let out the darkness. And he used many ingenious arguments to show me how I might by that means have been deceived. I own that he puzzled me a little, but he did not satisfy me. And the subsequent observations I made as above mentioned confirmed me in my first opinion. This event has given rise to my mind to several serious and important reflections. I considered it that if I had not been awakened so early in the morning, I should have slept 6 hours longer by the light of the sun, and in exchange have lived 6 hours the following night by candlelight, and that the latter being a much more expensive light than the former, my love of economy induced me to muster up what little arithmetic I could master of, and to make some calculations, which I shall give you, after observing that utility is, in my opinion, the test of value in matters of invention. That a discovery which can be applied to no use, or is not good for something, is good for nothing. All right. Now he goes into a bunch of calculations, which I'm a huge fan of, because he is already dripping with sarcasm about how nobody knew that the sun actually rose before noon in the city of Paris. But if you're not convinced yet, he's going to show you that by simply rising with the sun, they can save so much money. I took for the basis of my calculation in the supposition that there are 100,000 families in Paris, and that these families consume in the night half a pound of bougies or candles per hour. I don't know if that's how you say it. Bougies. I'm guessing bougies, because France, bourgeoisie, that whole thing. Anyhow, half a pound of bougies or candles per hour. I think this is a moderate allowance, taking one family with another, for though I believe some consume less, I know that many consume a great deal more. Then, estimating 7 hours per day as the medium quantity between the time of the sun's rising and hours, he rises during the 6 following months from 6 to 8 hours before noon. And there being 7 hours, of course, per night in which we burn candles, the count will stand thus. In the 6 months between the 20th of March and the 20th of September, there are nights. There are 183 nights. 7 hours in each night in which we burn candles. Multiplication gives us the total number of hours being 1,281. 1,280 hours multiplied by 100,000. The number of families give us 128 millions 100,000 hours spent at Paris by candlelight, at which half a pound of wax and tallow per hour gives us the weight of 64,050,000 pounds. which, estimating the whole at the median price of 30 sols to the pound, I don't know how much a sol is. I'm guessing that's like cents, but in French currency. 30 sols the pound makes the sum of 96,075,000 livres tournois. That must be their currency back in the. It used to be the franc, I thought. Anyway, an immense sum that the city of Paris might save every year only by the economy of using sunshine instead of candles. If it should be said that people are apt to be obstinately attached to old customs and that it will be difficult to induce them to rise before noon, consequently my discovery can be of but little use. I answered, nil desperandum. I believe all who have a common sense, as soon as they have learnt from this paper that it is daylight when the sun rises, will contrive to rise with him. And to compel the rest, I would propose the following regulation. First, let a tax be laid of a louis per window, per window, on every window that is provided with shutters to keep out the light of the sun. Second, same salutary operation of police be made use of to prevent our burning candles that inclined us to last winter to be more economical in burning wood. That is, let guards be placed in the shop of all the wax and tallow chandlers. No family permitted to be supplied with more than 1 pound of candles per week. Third, let guards be posted posted to stop all the coaches and traffic that would pass the streets after sunset, except for those of physicians, surgeons, and midwives. Fourth, every morning, as soon as the sun rises, let all the bells in every church be set ringing, and that is not sufficient. Let cannon be fired in every street to wake the sluggards effectually, and make them open their eyes to see their true interest. All the difficulty will be in the first 2 or 3 days, after which the reformation will be as natural and easy as the present irregularity. For test que la première parce que I don't speak French, nor do I read it. Oblige a man to rise at 4 in the morning, and it is more than probably he shall willingly go to bed at 8 in the evening. Having had 8 hours of sleep, he will rise more willingly at 4 in the morning following. This sum of 96,075,000 livres is not the whole of what may be saved by my economical project. You may observe that I have calculated upon only 1/2 of the year, and much may be saved in the other, though the days are shorter. Besides, the immense flock of wax and tallow left unconsumed during the summer probably make candles much cheaper for the ensuing winter, continue cheaper as long as the processed reformation shall be supported. For the great benefit of this discovery, thus freely communicated and bestowed by me upon the public, I demand neither place, pension, exclusive privilege, or any other reward whatever. I expect only to have the honor of it. And yet I know there are little envious minds who will, as usual, deny me this and say that my invention was known to the ancients, and perhaps they may bring passages out of old books in proof of it. I will not dispute with these people that the ancients might know that the sun would rise at certain hours. They possibly had, as we have almanacs that predicted it. But it does not follow from thence that they knew he gave light as soon as he rose. This is what I claim as my discovery. Ancients knew it. It must have been long since forgotten, for it certainly was unknown to the moderns, at least to the Parisians. To prove, I need use but one plain, simple argument. They are as well instructed, judicious, and prudent a people as exist anywhere in the world, all professing, like myself, to be lovers of economy, and from the many heavy taxes required from them by the necessities of the state, have surely an abundant reason to be economical. I say it is impossible that so sensible a people, under such circumstances, should have lived so long by the smoky, unwholesome, and enormously expensive light of candles. If they had really known, they might have had as much pure light of the sun for nothing. And then he stopped. So, in a long roundabout and quite frankly pretty hilarious way, Ben Franklin introduced the idea of daylight savings time through a satirical post to a newspaper calling the Frenchmen a bunch of lazy assholes that didn't get out of bed before noon. And this is how he is given credit for inventing daylight savings time. So, as I said before, on a technicality, yeah, that is true. But how did we get to the modern day daylight saving time that we all know and forget every year until it's upon us? And instead of just being like, "Hey, why do we keep doing this twice a year, setting the clocks forward and back and forgetting about it and running late or way ahead and then eventually getting into a groove of things instead of just letting things be?" Well, let's start with how time used to be told, and that was by the sun. They called it solar time. Used a sundial. Noon was considered the highest point of the sun in the day, so um, as far as where we're at currently in the middle of the summer, noon might actually be about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 2:30 when it's real hot. Sun's just straight above you. But we don't run on solar time anymore. We run on what is called standard time, and it was started in Great Britain, and it all started because of the railroads. It eventually spread to the United States and throughout the world, but the Brits were the first one to start it. And so, with every different city and region within Great Britain, which is not a real big place as far as countries go, about as big as the New England region, probably something like that. Maybe about as big as Texas. I'm not real for sure, but nowhere near as big as the U.S. Not even close. Um. So I'm reading from and with exposing my bias here. I'll pop it up on the screen. But I'm reading from a place called indaylightsavingstime.org. So, they're obviously not huge fans of daylight savings time. So, saving time. So, here we are. Standard time is born in Britain. Britain became the first country to establish one standard time throughout the country in response to the railroads' overt criticisms of local mean time. That's in November 1840. The Great Western Railway was the first to follow London time. Soon other railways followed. By 1847, most railroads used this time. It was consequently called Standard Time because it standardized the time across Britain. The name stuck, and we still use that nomenclature today. London time also became known as Greenwich Mean Time. Mean time being like your local time by the sun. So, is the time at the Royal Observatory's Shepherd Gate clock in Greenwich, England. Remains the same all year round and is the time against which the rest of the world's time is measured. Because at the time, Great Britain controlled pretty much the whole world. Sun never set on the British Empire. So that's why, and London being the heart of the British Empire, that's why we have the Greenwich Mean Time as the standard for the entire world. Eventually, by 1855, the majority of British public clocks set to Greenwich Mean Time, and August 2nd, they made it into law. All right, so that's how we started Standard Time. Now they quickly moved over to the, well, I won't say quickly, but by 1870 or 1883, November 18th, so about 10 days from now, U.S. and Canadian Railways and let's see. All right, so William Lambert, an amateur astronomer, was the first person in the U.S. to preach the necessity for time standardization. Recurring problem was that time was a local construct, with most cities and towns using some type of local solar time, typically based on a high noon, the time when the sun was the highest in the day. However, the lack of consistency caused problems as more modern technology, such as the advent of the railroad, made each city interconnected. In 1809, Lambert unsuccessfully recommended the concept of time meridians, or different time zones, to Congress. In 1870, Charles Dowd offered a similar suggestion that was also rejected. However, Dowd's second proposal in 1872 was ultimately adopted on November 18th, 1883 by U.S. and Canadian Railways, and subsequently 4 continental time zones emerged to put an end to the craziness. So the railroads really played a big part, because, as we're experiencing now with the whole supply chain debacle that we've been going through, things running on a schedule, and something I'm not the greatest at running on a schedule, but I've been seen a little bit on the logistics end of things at like a packing plant, or just shipping cattle and whatnot. But everything's on time frame, and you notice it in the feedlot even. Trucks are supposed to load at 8, but something busted through a fence or whatever and spilled the herd, and what do you know? 8 o'clock load out time turns into like noon 30, 1 o'clock. And when you're supposed to be receiving cattle at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, turns into 9, 10 o'clock at night, and it just screws everything up. And when you're working in such a heavily interconnected economy like we are now, but also like it was starting to be back in the 1880s when this took place, if you didn't have a set time, you're going by each different towns high noon, and that that town might be ran by just some bumbling drunk who decides high noon is whenever he says it is. So, in one of the areas, where I will give the federal government credit, creating the time zones is a pretty good idea. Standardized time, that way things happen when they're supposed to. Schedules can be made, and there was something. We'll skip ahead a little bit, but it was after World War II, before, and it's not so much on the time zones as it is on daylight saving. But essentially, you had they were saying in some place in Iowa, to travel across the state by train, you'd travel through 7 different time zones, and that all just had to do with how each county or city voted on daylight saving. But before that, even before even the standardized time, that's kind of how it was all the time, which is somewhat fine if you're dealing with with wagons and horses and stuff, because you can basically you're planning on being wherever you're going by noon or sundown, and you adjust accordingly along the way, and and it makes things a little bit easier. But where a train, as you're traveling as far in a couple hours as as a guy a horseback or a foot might travel in a single day. Well, you can get to places a lot quicker, obviously, and now everything now you're planning on going from Abilene to Dodge City, and you're planning on being in Dodge City at noon. But is that a Abilene noon or Dodge City noon? Even though they're currently on the same time zone, um, you know, if you're going by high noon, that might be off by a couple minutes or something like that. Just going that short little distance, and then a couple minutes on railroad logistics and dispatch. That could turn into hours, if not days, of problems later on, especially if there's a collision. And that was what was kind of causing all of it. So in come the time zones. And pretty soon it spread to around the entire world. So now you can pull up your little iPhone and go to the time setting, and you can pull up every time zone in the world, basically. So then the Canadians were the first to really implement any sort of daylight saving time. Some people say Austria or Germany, but in 1908, started July, the people of Port Arthur in Ontario pushed their clocks forward by an hour. They said it proved to be effective, and soon other cities followed suit. In 1914, Regina and Saskatchewan started using daylight saving time, with Winnipeg and Brandon in the following year of 1916 following suit. While parts of Canada did start using daylight saving time for it, there was comprehensive consideration going on in Europe. In the early 1900s, London builder William Willett was the first to seriously advocate the concept of daylight saving time. In his pamphlet Waste of Daylight, Willett proposed advancing the clocks by 20 minutes on each Sunday in April, and then turning them back the same amount for Sundays in September. Soon after Willett's emphatic lobbying for daylight saving time, Robert Pierce introduced a bill in the House of Commons mandating adjusting the clocks. However, significant opposition, especially from the farmers, and of course much ridicule, killed the bill multiple times. Willett died in 1919. But then the World War I kicked off, and basically all of Europe switches over to daylight saving time, and then U.S. as well in 1980. All right, so yeah, the U.S. in 1918 formally adopts daylight saving, and it was an act to preserve daylight and provide standard time for the United States. So this is kind of where the farmers really came into it. As would be expected, the U.S. Entrance into caused a significant opposition and lobbying, particularly by agricultural industry, which was deeply opposed to the time change during the war. Farmers and other agrarians, it was the sun, not the hands of a clock, that dictated their schedules. After all, dew doesn't evaporate at a specific time. Cows typically aren't too keen on an earlier milking. Roosters worked less since they came and went according to the clock, and those darn roosters sure can't tell time. Massive lobbying led to the 1919 repeal of daylight saving time. Despite the woes of retail and recreational businesses that championed the time change, because later daylight spurred more economic activity for shops and activities. Consequently, the experiment of daylight saving time was repealed within a year and relegated to local option, with few states and cities continuing. So all of a year, and the farmers pissed off to beat the ban. Retail stores and urban centers liked it, but huge backlash. They repeal it. World War II hits, and FDR created a year-round daylight saving time, and he called it wartime, from February 9th, 1942 until September 30th, 1945. Congress enacted the Wartime Act on January 2nd, January 20th, 1942. Year-round daylight saving time was reinstated in the United States as a wartime measure to conserve energy resources. Consequently, between the war's end and 1966, confusion regarding time was rampant, especially for certain industries. Some cities and states continued to follow it, while others did not. It was almost as inconsistent as before the formation of Standard Time, where different cities and towns all used a different solar time. In particular, transportation and broadcasting were burdened with scheduling changes when a state or town began or ended daylight saving time. When the 1960s arrived, DST was observance in the U.S. was quite convoluted, with no agreement about when the clocks should be changed. During this time, some cities and states continued to adhere to the semi-annual time change. However, these jurisdictions could start and end daylight saving time whenever they wanted. In fact, a 1963 article aptly named Time Magazine referred to this confusion as a chaos of clocks. Among the contributing reasons to this chaos included that there were 23 different pairs of time change start and stop times in Iowa alone. The twin cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis, Minnesota, observed daylight saving time at different times, and journeying between Steubenville, Ohio, and Moundsville, West Virginia, just 39.3 miles, subjected travelers to 7 different time changes. Well, yeah, it's West Virginia. They're all feuding with each other, so of course each little holler is going to have its own time change. Why wouldn't it? Then it says, essentially it became a battle between indoor and outdoor industries, with state and local governments, as usual, failing to bring some common sense into the melee. Then, in 1966, Congress decided to end the confusion with the Uniform Time Act. LBJ signed into law in on April 12th. This law standardized DST, start on the last Sunday in April and end on the last Sunday in October. So, what a mess. States that wish to be exempt from this law could enact legislation, which Hawaii and most of Arizona did. However, this act created the necessary uniformity across the U.S. within each time zone, save for those states that filed an exemption. In 1972, Congress amended the act that if a state was situated in multiple time zones, that the state could elect to exempt part of the state in one time zone while maintaining that the other part of the state would, in fact, observe daylight saving time, because that's what the government does. They make it way more clearer. Then, January 4th, 1974, Nixon signs Emergency Daylight Savings Time Energy Conservation Act, which required enacting DST on January 6, 1974. This was in response to OPEC and an oil embargo. In order to look effective, Nixon and Congress passed the 2-year emergency bill under the presumption that the year-round daylight saving time would produce significant energy saving by the reduced use of electric lights and other unnecessary power consumption. And then they used a whole bunch of other stuff to try to sell this, including crime reduction, more daylight outdoor playtime, improved traffic safety, and greater economic opportunities, because that's what they always promise you when you're running for office. Crime reduction, maybe not the outdoor playtime. Traffic safety, greater economic opportunities. That could apply to any bill that they're trying to pass. On October 5th of that year, Congress amended the act, returning to standard time on 27th of October. Following year, started on February 23rd, ended on October 26th. But they changed it again, and in 86, they moved it to where it started on the first Sunday in April. In 05, the Energy Policy Act extended daylight saving time, primarily as a result of the candy lobby, which fought for the extension of daylight saving time so that trick-or-treaters would have more daylight on the evening of Halloween. So they moved it back to the first Sunday of November. And yeah, so twice a year, the farmers and ranchers and agricultural community gets blamed for this hearted policy of moving your clocks forward and back because science, I guess. Trust the science. All the energy saving that we're going to get from this. Indiana ran a bunch of energy savings, and it was inconclusive, pretty much. It showed that it would reduce some energy consumption, and back in old Ben Franklin's day, it made a little bit more sense, even though he said it tongue-in-cheek, which is a fancy way to say sarcastic. He was a smartass about it. But at the time, when you did actually have to burn a candle or an oil lamp to have light after dark, yeah, that was a little more. You could see that the argument that he was jokingly trying to make, or that somebody who was serious about it would have been trying to make. So in the 1880s, makes a little more sense. I wouldn't say it makes perfect sense, but it makes a little more sense. However, going back to the ag side of things, Ben Franklin was far more in line with the ag industry, meaning that why don't you just get up when the sun's up and quit working when the sun goes down, and then then you can worry about the time in between that. But if you're waking up at noon, it doesn't matter how much doesn't really matter that much how much you set your clocks forward or back. The sun shines when it's up, and every time when the sun rises, there's sunlight. So it's just I find this just to be a fascinating case that it just government inaction where somebody, namely the railroad industry, lobbies for this standardized time, which makes a lot of sense. That part makes a lot of sense. Well, then a bunch of different people get this harebrained scheme that we're going to, either increase the war effort, conserve energy, or do something, whether it be to fight a war or to fight an oil embargo from OPEC or whatever the case may be, that we're going to show them and we're going to disrupt our lives twice a year and spend the, the weeks at, probably 2 weeks afterwards adjusting to this upending of our normal daily routine. And we're going to save energy doing it. Hell yeah. America. And it's weird, and it's funny that the whole blaming the ag industry has stuck because, for example, the clock's always set back or forward at 2 a.m. on a Sunday, and most people, I wouldn't say, I don't know most, but it's typically understood that Sunday's a day of rest. Not always the case, obviously, but more often than not, if you work a 9 to 5 job, chances are you're going to be off work on Sunday. If you're in the ag industry, particularly if you're in the animal agriculture, cows, horses, sheep, pigs, whatever you're raising, they eat every day. Sunday be damned. And so somebody is feeding cattle, taking care of animals on a Sunday. And when we have to set our clocks back or spring forward, whatever, fall back, spring forward, all that does is disrupt our entire day by a whole hour. And when I was at, I'm not sure how the JBS yard did their transition, but at Cactus, we started a month ahead of time. Every week, we would either roll back 15 minutes or bump ahead 15 minutes. And let me tell you something, it is real hard to set your phone clock 15 minutes ahead. I mean, I'm sure there's a way to do it, but typically you just click the time zone that you're in. But where we're trying to transition them to falling back for an hour, every week we'd bump up 15 minutes. And so it made it a little easier. But like I said, when now we're in the day and age of technology where you have a phone, and like I said, there's probably a way where you can set the clock ahead on there by 15 minutes, but typically you just go by time zone, so it's by an hour. And all of that is for all those people who really hate factory farming. We do all of that. The humans disrupt their day or their life for a full month in order that the cattle have a smooth transition to when they get fed. When this arbitrary policy decided by special interest lobbying and our federal government has decided that we need to change our clocks forward or back, depending on the time of the year, 1 hour because science or something. Daylight savings time is gay. Gayer than AIDS. That is a scientific fact. And just not do it. Don't ever change your clocks. Worry about the time zone that you're in. Does that make sense? Other than that, sun coming up when it's coming up. Not set our clocks around. Or let's do set our clocks around it. Let's not change it. Once we set a time, let's keep it. Yeah. Fucking daylight savings time. There's that meme that goes around every year too. It's only, or they're just explaining how daylight saving time works to an old Indian chief, and he said only the white man would cut an inch off the top of the blanket and sew it onto the bottom of the blanket and try to convince you that you have a longer blanket. And it makes a lot of sense. Also, I posted a meme, might have been last year or the year before, when the time changed, and a lot of backlash, more backlash than I expected over such an arbitrary tradition. That much like your federal income tax withholding, how they just take it out of your paycheck. That's actually a wartime provision. It's only supposed to be used during times of war, so that we got to make sure that we can buy bombs first before we do. We can't delay the buying of the bombs when we're in war, so they got to take your money from you as you go. But then, after World War II ended, we still had wars to fight, even though we didn't call them wars anymore. Police actions or interventions or whatever we called them. They just keep taking the taxes out of your paycheck preemptively because that we're still at war, I guess. Which we are, I guess. Not declared. So, anyway, it's just one of those government programs that gets started because of war and then never ends. Patriot Act. Daylight saving time, it seems pretty harmless. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's just something to bitch about. But it's a good example of just how government programs go awry, or they just don't ever end. And we should take a stand. End daylight savings time, or continued daylight savings time indefinitely. I don't know which one's better. Probably the one from the spring. I like when it gets dark way later. I like that one. So then just not change our clocks ever again. Whatever that time is, I think that's when daylight savings time starts in the spring. Whatever that time change is, let's keep that one all the time until the end of time. Don't do any more gay stuff like that. It's stupid. And by gay, I mean gay. Stupid. Don't do that. Daylight Gayvings time. And on that note, move your ass for burning daylight.